Hello everyone, and welcome to the Student Astronaut Challenge. Today we will be discussing the Spaceflight Simulation Challenge. We will have a mission overview and go over some of the specifics of the mission checklist. We will also learn what the path of a typical flight will look like. It will be helpful at this point to have a copy of the classroom mission checklist with you. We will begin today with, what is a mission? Simply put, a mission is a flight of the simulator system beginning with a pre-launch countdown at roughly t-5 minutes, through a launch, through an orbit of the Earth, and ending with a landing at the shuttle landing facility, hopefully. A basic mission lasts approximately 45 to 55 minutes and consists of a 6-member team, 3 mission control members, and 3 flight crew. The mission control team consists of 2 mission controllers and a mission director. As seen in the picture here, the mission controllers are seated in the front with the mission director seated directly behind. In the flight crew, we have a mission commander, a pilot, and a flight engineer. The commander is seated on the left and the pilot on the right, with the flight engineer seated behind the pilot at the flight engineer's panel. Here we can see an example of a classroom setup, with the commander, pilot, and engineer all using laptops, each of which is being cloned to a second monitor, so that the mission control team can view all of the same information. There is no specific way required for the practice stations to be set up. We recommend whatever method works best for your team to be able to easily communicate with one another. As you will see in one of our other videos, communication is very important to doing well in this challenge. And since communication is so important, we need to know what information to communicate. So next, let's look at the anatomy of a mission checklist. Making sure that all team members fully understand the mission checklist is another key to a successful flight. And to help your students learn this information, there are 3 versions of the checklist. A classroom version, a simulator version, which is what the mission control team will use at competition, and finally, knee boards, which the flight crew will use. First, let's examine the classroom version. This checklist will say classroom and have a version number in the upper right-hand corner. Make sure that you are using the latest version located on the SAC website. It will also have a page before the first launch command that says System Setup. This is where you will load commands into the system that will be executed during the mission. Note here that in the sim, these commands will be entered during the mission via MacroPad. There is also a section on this page called Checklist Notes. These notes are unique to this version and help the students learn who does each command and where to find them. As an example, we see here in COM Block 26 that there is a command to place the KU antenna to stow. Beneath this, we see a note in blue telling the engineer to press the spacebar. We also see a red number 7 beside the command. This corresponds to a panel number in the sim. The commander and pilot panels are numbered left to right, 1 through 6, and the same for the flight engineer, 7 through 9. Now let's look at the simulator version. This version will say simulator and also have a version number in the upper right-hand corner. This checklist begins with pre-launch. You will notice that this version has no blue notations or panel numbers listed. Students should start using this version once they are comfortable with all switch locations. Now let's look at the parts of the checklist. First, we have the COM block, beginning with block 1 and ending with block 44. These block numbers are used to keep the team oriented to what procedure is currently taking place. Along with the COM block is the time listing, and each block should be started at the listed time. Next, we have the procedure column. That notes all of the commands to be completed in a given block. And last, we have the mission control notes column, where we find advisements and announcements that mission control will give out. The commands on the checklist should be given out by the flight engineer and executed by the appropriate team member. There are different types of commands within the procedure block. Commands in all caps correspond to switches on the switch panels. These can be practiced in the classroom, by printing the switch panel sheets and placing them in the proper location, and then having the student touch the switch position to denote flipping it. Commands in bold correspond to macro pad buttons. These can be practiced in the same way as switches. Note, in the classroom, these correspond to the commands typed in at the beginning of the mission. You will also see that there are spaces between some commands. These match the advisements and announcements in the mission control column, and they help the team to know to wait for these before continuing. This is especially important because on the kneeboard version, the mission control column does not exist, and the space is the only way that the flight crew knows to wait. Now that we know how the checklist works, let's take a look at the parts of a mission. There are 5 parts laid out in the mission checklist. They are Prelaunch, Ascent, Orbit Insertion, Deorbit, and Landing. Prelaunch begins with a planned launch hold at T-5 minutes, and continues through a go-no-go confirmation, and ends with the execution of the launch command and announcement of liftoff. The first command given in the Ascent section is in COM Block 8 at T plus 20 seconds. This section continues through Block 15 with main engine cutoff, or MECO. From there we move to Orbit Insertion, beginning at COM Block 16, with one of the busier portions of the checklist, affectionately known as the Gauntlet, in which teams have approximately 2 minutes to complete a large number of commands. This section also has a procedure for the mission commander to manually maneuver the vehicle to a zero attitude or prograde position. This is done with a joystick and can be practiced by using the auto prograde button to determine what the position looks like and then copying that with the joystick. Deorbit begins with Block 26 and prepares the vehicle for re-entry. There are commands for retrograde and prograde in this section. These are not manual, but instead use the corresponding button at the bottom of the orbiter screen. This section also has a procedure for a deorbit burn to slow the vehicle for re-entry. The final section is landing. To start this section, orbiter will have to be exited and restarted with the landing scenario. This is done because a full re-entry procedure would take too long to be practical. Landing starts with COM Block 37. From this point on, blocks will be based on altitude instead of time. Please check the landing guide on the SAC website for tips on practicing landing. This brings us to our end of mission. I hope you have enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions, please visit our website at studentastronautchallenge.com. I hope to see you soon on the launch pad, and let's fly.